What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Case Digital. In today's video, we're answering the question of how to check if a string is a palindrome in Python. So without further ado, let's hop right in and start coding. All right, so before we get into coding of how to check if a word or string is a palindrome, I want to define what a palindrome is. Now, if we head over to Wikipedia, essentially it says that a palindrome is a word, a number, a phrase, or sequence of symbols that reads the same backwards as forwards, such as the words madame or race car, the date and time, and the date and time example that they provide is 12/21/33 at the hour of 12:21, and the sentence a man, a plan, a canal dash Panama. Now, what I want to do is essentially, or point out here, is essentially that they're not taking into account things such as spaces or the slashes or the colons or the dash when it comes to the sentence. All they care about is basically the sequence of symbols or characters or that are within the word, such as madame and race car and over this date and time. Now, it gives you an example. Here's the longest this 19-letter Finnish word is apparently a palindrome, as well as here's the longest 12-letter term for English. So essentially, that's what a palindrome is. So when we take into account of coding up our stuff, we need to make sure that we need to remove all spaces and punctuation if there is any. So let's hop right in and start coding up our function of how we can determine whether or not words are palindromes. All right, so the reason I think this question also is used in computer science to help you kind of like write up something to help determine whether it's a palindrome is because it's actually going to let us test our kind of thought power about how of all the previous stuff that we learned. The reason being, the problem essentially is given a string, can you compare it and then to its reverse counterpart, right? So I believe I have a video that shows you how you can reverse a string in Python. Essentially, we're going to use that technique. I have videos on how you can compare, use if statements or compare stuff to get Boolean and true responses, or true and false or Boolean responses. So we're going to put all that together in this and check whether or not this string is a palindrome. And I put in here that here's a list of palindromes and here's a list of non-palindromes, or at least they should be non-palindromes, right? Because if I do owl and look at the reverse, OWL is not the same as LWO, right? And then case, CASE, is not the same as ESAE or EASC. So again, this list, everything should be a palindrome. And look, I even provided a list which I found off that same Wikipedia page down below, which is essentially it's got punctuation and spaces. We've got uppercase and lowercase. And so we need to take that into account because they just talked about what I just showed that this should be a palindrome. So let's talk about this. So if we use a for loop, since these are in lists, I wanted to bring that capability in. I get my current string and then in palindromes. Now we're just going to go through just the palindrome cases first. And then we'll go through the non-palindromes. So we have our list. Now, what do we do here? So the first thing that we need to do is essentially we need to get the reverse of the list. So if I get the reverse of this list, it's going to be, or the reverse of this string, it's going to be the reverse string is going to be equal to. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this. I'm going to use the one that I always use, which is basically just going to be cur string, and then we do this list comprehension technique and then do that. That will give you the reverse of the string. You can also just use the reverse function and pass your string into it, and that should give you the same as well. But I'm going to use this one. And so if I print this out, so just to show everything, so print, I'm going to say, we're going to say that this will make the F string, so we'll do something like the cur string, and then we'll do like, as if it's comparing, equal to our reverse string is a palindrome, which is equal to and we'll print that out in a minute. So if I run this, because essentially what you should see is a list of all the reverse stuff. If I run, you get madame, Mr. Owl ate my middle worm is that, Eve is Eve, Bob is Bob, 33 is 33, 121 is 121, right? Now, the thing to point out here is just like in that Wikipedia article, they weren't really caring much about whether or not it was capitalized or not capitalized letters and whatnot. So let's fix that and put that into a comparison, because essentially, and the reason I want to bring that up, because if I say is palindrome and then I go something like this, and then we do something, or we create the variable is palindrome equal to cur string equals to the reverse string, what you'll find. Now this will tell us, this will give us a true, this will assign a true false to this this variable. So if we pass it in here, this should then say cur string equals reverse string is palindrome, and then this should be say true or false. So if we run this, we get something like madame is palindrome is true. That Mr. Owl ate my metal worm to that is false. Eve is true. Bob to Bob is false. 33 and 121 are true. Now, as I noted, like I said, they didn't really care about punctuation. So we need to take care of that, because in their example, they were saying that this is straight from the Wikipedia article saying that this is a palindrome, and this is saying that it should be one, but right here we're saying it's false. So one example of that is the Bob case. We need to worry about punctuation. So let's talk about how we're going to worry about the punctuation. All right, so to worry about essentially the punctuation part of it, or not the punctuation, but the casing of the letters, essentially we need to use a string function to help us lower everything or uppercase everything. Now, it's probably easiest case to just go something like, I'm going to just call this the non, I guess, punctuation, because eventually we'll do punctuation, string is equal to, and then we can take our current string, and then we can say, hey, I need to lower everything, right? Now, if we're going to use this to compare against, essentially we need to then replace this as our reverse string, and then this as our comparison there, right? And then we can also, if we want, we can then, we can put it right there as well. So that way we can see the output, right? To exactly see what's going on. So if we run this again, you should see that it just lowercase everything. And I could do the same as upper. And if I wanted to run this, and now everything's uppercase, but you can see that our Bob case has now been fixed where it was wrong, or where it was saying it wasn't a palindrome, where we knew it was, because even if it was B-O-B, and any one of these is capitalized, going reverse, B-O-B is the same, right? It's the same letter. And so that's why we had to worry about taking off the upper or taking off the casing of the letters. But if we go back, and I'm gonna put that back to lowercase because I want to point out that this is now true. So that was always true in the beginning. This is true. This is now true, the Bob case. The numbers were always true. But we still have the case where our sentence is not saying it's a palindrome when we know from our looking up on Wikipedia that it said it was. So how are we going to worry about it? Well, like I noted when we were talking about what is a palindrome, they don't care about the punctuation or the spaces. They only care about a symbol or a letter or a number reversed being the same as it was going forward. So that means that in our case, for this sentence, we need to remove this punctuation. So how are we going to go about and do that? All right, so handling these characters or these special characters that we don't care about, we need to remove them, right? And I have some videos that are how to remove characters, how to remove punctuation, so you can go check those out. But essentially, I'm going to do, because in our example, we don't need to remove every single casing or every single punctuation, but it would be good to create a function or something that would then strip a string of all of its punctuation, and it would be similar to what I'm going to write here. Now, to do that, essentially, because we just need to compare our original string to its reverse counterpart, I don't need to do these same removal of punctuation on each one of these. I just need to do it to our non-punct string, and then that when we reverse it here, it should be taken care of. So essentially, that's how you can avoid duplication of your code and make things a lot easier. But essentially, all I need to do is use the replace function in Python, because strings are mutable, meaning they can't be changed in place. So you have to basically alter them and then reassign them to a variable. So I'm going to do something like replace, and then I just need to remove, say, this space, and then replace that with an empty string. So this will make it so as it goes through the string, every single period mark will be changed to an empty string. And if we run, and then again, we're just reversing what we just did. We check it, and then we show it and tell us whether or not it's a palindrome. Now, if I run that, you'll see that Mr. Owl, that space is, or that period is now gone, but it's still saying it's false. What the heck, right? Because now the period is gone from over here, but it's still false. And that is going back to the fact that, again, our examples and the definition of a palindrome does not care about these spaces. So we have to do the exact same thing here. And the nice thing is in Python, you can chain these, because essentially out of this is a string. When you run this function, the output is a string. So then we can chain that to the output of this, chained with this will replace all of our dots. And then if we do this, now we're replacing all of our spaces with empty strings. So this should shorten this up. And if I rerun this, I get something like Madame is a palindrome. All this with all of the extra stuff removed is a palindrome. Eve is a palindrome. Bob is a palindrome. 33 and 21 are all palindromes. So right there. Now let's throw in, let's throw in the string of the 12 12/21/33 space 12:21 string and see what happens. So if I run this, what you say, or what we get is that this is a palindrome is false. And this goes back to, look, there's more characters in here that we have that we need to remove because it removed the space that was in there. So if I go back down here and I again change something on, and this is why I said it's probably better to go create a whole function that we can pass through and remove all of the spaces. But you can check out the previous video on how I did that. Right here, I'm just going to show you just some pretty quick and dirty ways of just removing stuff. And I can say replace all these spaces with an empty string. I can say, and this, you can see how this would get really long, which can kind of, make your code kind of messy, which again is a case for we probably need to better go and replace that. Replace all of this with a function that just removes that. And so, like I said, so we moved all the spaces, and boom, just like this, we get 12/21/33 12/21 is the same as 12/21/33 12/21 because it reversed everything because we removed all of it. We then reversed it, and it is a palindrome. So that is why those are saying that those are still palindromes because it doesn't care about the spaces. All right, so that is essentially how you can remove a palindrome. But I don't think this is good enough, right? Because I think you guys deserve better. And I did just mention, hey, you should go out and try and create a function that removes all punctuation, put in here because that would be a good exercise. However, for those that are kind of new to this, I kind of want to show you how to do that, right? Because I think one of the things when it comes to programming is figuring out the problem and then optimizing it, making it better, and or cleaning up your code. Because here's an example. If I then took this code right here and I put it into a function, and then I went and used one of the previous videos that I have that shows you how to get all the words out of a file, and I pass this through, we might be in trouble and things might not work due to the fact that I would have to go read that file and find out what all the punctuation is and then do the dot replace. And I think you guys deserve better. I think you guys deserve to show how essentially you would go through the process of cleaning this up, replacing it, better thinking through your problem so it can hopefully handle all cases. And that's what I want to do with you right now. I want to go through with you and create this function that would eliminate this constantly needing to add new replaces and give you a nice little function that you can just call right here, do the reverse, and then compare, right? So let's go ahead and do that. To do that, you essentially do need to import a new module. And so we're going to import the string module. The reason being because the string module has a nice little punctuation function that will return a string of punctuation. And we're going to create a function called remove punc and spaces. And then we're going to pass in an input string. And this is going to be of type string. And then we're going to return out a type of string, right? So like I said, we need to basically go through and find all punctuation and remove it from our input, right? And to do that, I can just say for the punctuation in string dot punctuation, because this will return a list, or no, excuse me, this will return a string of all the punctuation values. However, it does not have spaces, so we have to do something like space and give it that. Now, this is even bigger string, and what we're going to do is we're going to loop through this string, which means that every single character in the string will now as we go through the list, will become a punctuation value. And then we can just say, but simply do our replace method of doing input is equal to input.replace and give it the punctuation value and then replace it with the empty string. Now, all we have left to do there is just say return our input. And just like that, we should have a string that has been stripped of any type of punctuation and spaces. So if we then have this, all we have to do is use it. And to use it, all we can say is hasta la pasta to that piece of code, and we can say remove punc and spaces, pass in our current string, and just like that, we now have, as you can see, we turned a really nasty one-liner, or what happens if you have some sort of like code formatting, it'll kind of break it up so it's more readable. Rather, what we had, which was taking up several lines of code, we now have just one line that gives us our non-punctuated string. And if we then go through and run all of our code again, this should work. Everything should be a palindrome. And we go through and look, and just like that, we notice that we did not account for lowercasing everything. Now or the casing, right? So we can go back through and we can either update this function or we can just simply say we want to then lower it right here. And I would probably put it here because the title of this function is, and the purpose of it is to remove punctuation basically and spaces. And so lowercasing something doesn't account for that. So if we rerun this, we now should see that everything should be a palindrome because we have our date that had the spaces and the different stuff as a palindrome. We have Madam, which is a different palindrome that one word or sentence, which is a palindrome now, or is a palindrome, not now. It was before. We just stripped it of all of the stuff we didn't care about. And I want to test this because we had the slashes here. What happens if I replace this with the tilde and a slash? If I go through and rerun this, you should see that it is still palindrome because we stripped it of that. And before, we weren't accounting for the tilde character, right? We were only counting for slashes and periods and spaces. But with our new function, we can account for all sorts of punctuation, right? So just like that, that is how you essentially can check a string if it's a palindrome. Now, one other thing we did not do is we did not check the non-palindromes, right? So I can do something where I can add lists, I can concatenate lists together to make one giant list. And if I run this, we should have only 3 cases this time where there is non-palindromes. And if we run it, we can see here's all the ones, here's all the ones from starting from here up that were our palindromes, and here's all the ones that are the non-palindromes. So, and you can see that when it reversed it and removed all the stuff, that those do not equal the same. So just like that, that's how you go about solving the problem of how to check a string for a palindrome, or that's just one way, right? There's other ways that you can do. You could do loops and stuff like that, but I wanted to walk you through, if I was given this problem, how would I go about and doing it, giving the knowledge that I have known and the things that I have taught on this channel about how you can use Python and what you can do with Python. So I hope that you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And until next time, keep on programming.